We're going to be tearing apart this song over the next 10 to 15 minutes, and it's going to be awesome. Talking about everything wrong with this mix and how to fix it. This was a mix that was submitted by one of the people on my list, Jeremiah. This song is called The Way We Move the Moon by Radio Moonglow. So if you like the song, you can go check it out as well there. I'm going to leave a link in the description as well so you can access it if you would like. With that said, let's listen to the song and see how close or far we are from having a pro mix.
We felt the touchdown, then felt our goose flesh. This is our world now, this is our reset. And though the bumps stayed, we found our sea legs. Time sometimes whispers, but it'll never bend. Here's the way we move the moon. Here's the way it's coming soon. The obstacles crushed a city built from the dust.
He was worried about the deepening ideological divide.
All right, so there is the majority of the mix. So let's talk about what we can do to fix this mix. The very first thing that pops out to me right away is actually a production item, not necessarily mixing. Without all the production really nailed down, is really hard to come up with a better mix. So the first thing is the vocals need to be tuned a little bit more. I know it can be a little bit obnoxious having to dive into the vocal all the time and fix those little itty bitty tuning errors, but it is 100% necessary to get a really, really professional sound. So the biggest area that I heard it was anything that has those little runs. So right here. So that middle note there, the da-da-da, is way off. And so that needs to be tightened up. And then this mix will sound 100 times more professional after the vocals are just tighter with the rest of the song. Especially when harmonies come in, sometimes they kind of hide the tuning errors, but also sometimes they accentuate it. So it's kind of all over the board in terms of this mix, but just something to keep in mind as well for anytime you're adding some additional harmonies that can accentuate tuning errors in your lead vocal as well. So that's the first thing, is just production. Overall, pretty solid. I don't really want to spend too much time on the production side of things here. Let's dive into the actual mix itself. The first thing I want to cover is dynamic issues and volume balance issues, because this mix is fraught with them. The first thing is the bass guitar is just too loud. It's overcoming everything. You can even look on the analyzer here. It's kind of totally taking over this 100 hertz area, and it's hiding a lot of the lead vocal and the kick drum and the percussion in general. It's overtaking so much space, even though it's living in this relatively small area inside of the mix. It's just too loud. So I would first back that off probably 3 to 6 dB, depending on where it actually fits. And then I would also bring up the percussion. The percussion is really not driving this song at all because you can't hear it. And it's being driven by the bass, which is okay, but the percussion is not adding anything to the mix. It's just so quiet, I can't hear it at all. One thing too is that this mix does sound like it was mixed on headphones, which does have its own issues, because when you're mixing on headphones, your vocal tends to be too quiet, your guitars tend to be too loud, your bass and your kick also tend to be too loud, which is interesting because the kick drum in this is actually really quiet, but we tend to overemphasize the bass when we are mixing on headphones. So those are two issues right away: less bass, more drums. The next one is the guitar. So especially the lead guitar is just too loud. It's also super clean, which is probably adding to the dynamic issues with the guitar. If it was a little bit more saturated or a little bit more compressed, you might have less issues with the guitar being so loud and in your face. I would probably back that off quite a bit. Again, probably between 3 and 5 decibels in order to ensure that the rest of the mix can kind of breathe a little bit. Every time the guitar comes in, it just feels like the whole mix is smothered by that guitar. You can also tell when we're in a section with a lot of guitar. Yeah, so if you listen to the guitar here, it's really overtaking this whole area around between 250 and 500 hertz.
We move the moon years away.
So if I was mastering this, I might be tempted to take this section down a bit just because it is so loud. But the issue isn't really the sonic balance of the song. The issue is the guitars are too loud, and the guitars are also really warm, which then further emphasizes that area, which isn't good. It does make the mix sound a bit muddy overall. The vocals are honestly just kind of hidden by the rest of the mix, and I think there's some tonal issues that need to be fixed with the vocals specifically, which is why they're being hidden inside of the mix. The vocals are just being hidden by the other elements that are so loud, namely the bass guitar and the other guitars. So I would fix those two things, and then that's going to fix like 90% of the issues inside of this mix, because everything else I have almost falls in line with those two moves. Moving on from the dynamic issues and balance, so moving back to just the sonic balance of individual instruments. First of all, the bass guitar is too bassy. Most of the time, the temptation with your bass guitar is just to bump it up at that, between 1 and 200 hertz range, just make it uber loud there. And we feel that low rumble, which primary characteristic and fundamental of the bass that we like, but it's often overemphasized and it actually overtakes the bottom end, hides the kick drum, and doesn't actually provide enough definition to actually hear what the bass is doing. And because we can't hear what the bass is doing, we then turn it up again, which then creates this very unhelpful cycle of bump up the bottom of the bass, turn it up, bump up the bottom of the bass, turn it up. All we're doing is just boosting it at 100 hertz over and over and over. So we want to avoid that by boosting in the mids, so probably around the 300 hertz range, and then also the 1.5 kilohertz range. I think that's where it's going to be really good in this particular mix. So if I just boost it right around here, the guitars are going to be just ridiculously loud, but then right here, the bass is probably going to be able to cut through the mix a lot more. I'd probably make some move like this, probably cut off the top there. This is probably what your bass EQ should look like in terms of fixing the bass inside of this mix. Overall, it's also just too clean. So you might be running into an issue where your bass just doesn't have enough characteristics. So if I boost it at 3 kilohertz, it might actually not do anything. But that's probably because you need to add some distortion or saturation to your bass. This is not meant to change the core characteristic of the bass, but it's meant to give you additional harmonic frequency at the higher up in the frequency range, that you can actually boost it effectively and hear the actual definition of the bass. So that would probably be my approach on the bass guitar in this mix. And so as I mentioned before, the guitars are just too warm, so I'd probably end up cutting those around the 3 to 400 hertz range quite a bit, and then also I'd probably just leave a high shelf. So I'd probably take my shelf over here and just boost the entire top end from probably 1 kilohertz up, something like this, because this is going to brighten up those guitars, allow them to cut through the mix still, but also cut back on the muddiness of them, and then allow them to just sit in the mix a bit more without being so loud, but still cutting through so you can hear them clearly. Probably they're being boosted so much because their core frequency is so much in the mud region of the mix, in that low mids, that they have to be boosted a ton in order to be audible inside of the mix. So that's the core issue with those guitars. I would definitely fix that. Something like this EQ curve will be excellent for that. It's similar with the bass. I might add some additional saturation or some very light distortion to these in order to get some more harmonics in the higher frequencies as well, just to be able to get this EQ curve to work properly, because if there's not enough high frequencies inside of the take itself, you might need to add some additional harmonics to be able to boost that. But then again, I'd probably make the EQ move first and then determine if I actually need some more harmonics to make this EQ move worth it or effective, essentially. And then moving on to the vocals are really bright and harsh, and it's kind of hard because they are hidden by the rest of the mix. But my initial thought was I would probably boost around the mid-range, so probably around 1500 or so. And then I would also boost around the low end, probably around 100, between 100 and 150 hertz. This is often the very bottom of the vocal, and depending on how you recorded it, you may not have that much of this at all, which is kind of the issue, is that there's no supporting of the vocal. You're not necessarily going to hear this that much, but it's going to open up the vocal a little bit more on that low end, be able to hear a bit more of it. So I'm just going to play with this EQ. Again, it's going to mess up the bass, but just pay attention to the vocal itself and how much better this cuts through the mix.
Then felt like loose flesh. This is our world now. This is our. It's coming soon. All the obstacles crushed. A city built from the dust.
So you can hear just that when you boost this middle range here, all of a sudden this vocal is just really, really present. And you might need a little bit more finesse than that in order to get the true vocal tone and quality you want. But this move right here is going to allow it to cut through the mix, and you're going to be able to hear every single word you're saying without actually boosting the volume of the vocal too much. So that is probably the move I would make on the vocal, at least initially. And then secondarily, I would also be using a lot more aggressive de-essing on your vocal. There's very, very strong S's, and they're very, very present. So I would probably throw on my handy dandy de-esser or something, Dynamics de-esser, and I'm going to be really aggressive with this. I would get at least 6 decibels of gain reduction with this. You probably already are, there probably is already some de-essing on this vocal, but it really needs some more. So I would definitely be a lot more aggressive with your de-essing inside of this vocal. And then beyond that, there's probably some spatial issues that we could deal with as well, but I don't really want to focus on those because the other issues are really going to hinder anything I say. Last thing that I want to cover is the overall sonic balance. So here is the EQ move that I would make if I were going to be mastering this song, relatively speaking, because this is going to fix the majority of the issues that I hear. So again, the bass is too loud, the vocals need to cut through. The song is missing a lot of high end because a lot of the elements are so muddy, such as the guitars and the bass. It's just the entire top end needs to be boosted. So this is probably roughly what I would do. So here's before. If this were my mix, I would be focusing 100% of my effort on the volume balance first, and then focus on the sonic issues, and then most of your other issues will be solved at that point as well. So there's very few dynamic issues that couldn't be solved by just some adjustment of the volume. That is my analysis of this mix. I hope this was really helpful for everyone watching. And if you did like this, then let me know in the comments, because I will do more of these videos. If you don't want more of this, then I won't do it. So let me know if you like these videos. Don't forget, if you need more help with your mixes, I have the free course called the Pro Mix Formula available. You can just get that in the description of this video. It's my gift to you for watching this video. Thanks for sticking with me, and I will see you in the next one.